as the year goes on, I get closer and closer.
To learn new skills and to build new acumen.
We can always touch. It's not.
When you get that, then you get a lot more excited about being around children.
Normal, in a sense, with all of the changes, of course.
Or how you can transform your own business.
On developing the whole child, socially, emotionally.
Traditional route of teaching young people
how to set boundaries, because this little victim here needs to know how to.
Doing very well, so they use that term.
Sometimes expanded them to go up to 40 minutes.
All of those things in education, of course, those things are important.
Student is going to our heads and our lungs.
The affirmations in the mirror for about 2 minutes.
What did you do in order to get yourself going?
This is amazing.
It happens, what seems to happen quite a bit in our school.
For the families to come, and they
is that really for the child, or is it for us, for the parent?
And doing new things for our brain.
Who's orchestrating everything in this universe?
Which parts of the brain are used?
Based on that map that we have.
See you with your smiling face.
Atul, thank you very much for allowing me to join you. Namaste to you, my friends.
Welcome. Say hi, Carrie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Marianne and Atul. It's my honor to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. Everyone today with us, we have Carrie Kling, and I'm telling you a little bit about her, but just for those that may not have met me yet, I am Marianne Harmon, founder of Music with Mare, and you can go to Facebook Music with Mare's Brain Facts page and check out the daily brain facts that I post for everyone to use and share. It's valuable information that is simple but important for everyone to know, not just for the children we work with, but for our own selves as well. So, Carrie, you are a mom, an educator, a parent, a coach, a speaker, an author, and somewhere in there, I'm thinking you have time to also cultivate some friendships and relax. That's a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah.
So, Carrie has 40 years of experience as an internationally recognized educator, counselor, parent coach, author, and speaker. She has given her experience to guide thousands of parents to reach their parenting goals. She's been a sought-after speaker for national and international conferences and loves to meet and work with parents and their families in her home state of Arizona and nationally and globally as well. She's written 2 books, created an educational video, and is currently an executive contributor for Brains Magazine. I want to know a little bit more about that. Carrie's articles all focus on various aspects of family life while guiding parents to more positive relationships and learning outcomes with their children. Coaching parents in one-on-one private sessions, teaching online classes, and providing in-person workshops are some of the ways that Carrie works with parents and their families. She holds a bachelor's degree in elementary and special ed and a master's degree of education and counseling. All of Carrie's work is grounded in neuroscience. I like that. Carrie states that her most powerful learning experience about parenting has been being the mom to her 2 20-year-old twin boys, as they have been her greatest teachers. They always are. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Marianne. And, you know, I'm so really honored to be here because what you and Atul and other people did at the beginning of the pandemic was really give a lifeline to parents, especially of children, early childhood ages. And what a gift.
Thank you so much. And that goes to Atul, really, He's the one, the mastermind behind the mastermind group. And I and friend of yours, Kathleen, friend, who we both respect so much. We all became friends, and it's so great to interconnect with all of you wonderful speakers. And hopefully now that we're out and about, we can start working together in other ways as well, and actually meet each other and be able to get a hug.
That would be wonderful.
Before we get going, I just want to let everyone know, in case you can hear the raspiness in my voice, I am getting over the flu and a 3-day conference, so my voice is not as pleasant as usual. Anyway, we're going to get started. Today's topic is about working with your children so that they have healthy sibling relationships, and how having that healthy relationships allows you to get along with the rest of the world. So, Carrie, let's start with, why are sibling relationships so important?
It's such a great topic. Excuse me. And I want to begin just talking about something related to parenting in general before I jump into the sibling relationship. I actually wrote an article for Brains Magazine about this. Parenting is the only role in our lives that I know of that is, I believe, the most important role. And yet most of us are just thrown into it. You don't need a license like a driver's license. You don't need to, take mandatory classes. And most of us are just like thrown in, here's your baby, without really understanding different stages of child development and different relationships. And so my plea to parents always, and this goes into the sibling relationship, is don't wait until there's a crisis in your family before you look for guidance. I know a lot of parents who have children, more than one child, and they're, many of the relationships with the siblings are wonderful, and some of them are not so wonderful. And the reason it's so important to get those relationships right at the beginning is that those sibling relationships are really the foundation for all of the other relationships that your child will have for the rest of their lives, whether
Absolutely.
it's cousins, friends at school, a future girlfriend, boyfriend, a future spouse. When we learn how to get along with our siblings, we can make better decisions about having healthier relationships for the rest of our lives.
That's right. When I was younger, well, I am the youngest of 3, so affectionately referred to as the brat. But my father always told us, when mom and I are gone,
you'll have each other.
And whenever we weren't getting along, there was a log in the backyard, and we would have to go sit on it. And my brother and sister used to have to go sit on it. I was too young at the time, but they had to sit on the log until he saw them talking and getting along. So it's a very valuable relationship. And could you delve a little bit more into why the sibling relationship is so important? I know you touched on it.
Absolutely. The part that I just touched on really is, we're talking about the beginning of the relationship, when the children are young, and that doesn't really matter how many years are, the children are apart. I have twins, they're 1 minute apart, and I feel the same way about them. As the children go on in life, there's a lot of research about having a sibling, and when you have a sibling that you have a positive, good relationship with, and you feel that there's someone out there who has your back, and you feel that there's someone who's your partner in crime, so to speak, that there's actually, as adults, there's less, well, teenagers and adults, less depression, less feelings of loneliness, less anxiety, because you have that person who's your flesh and blood to turn to. And then obviously, as people get older, even when you're much older, and then your parents, as you mentioned, your parents said, we're not always going to be here. It's a lot easier, I think, to go through the decline of your own parent if you're not alone and you have someone to go through that with.
Right.
It's one of my favorite quotes is that a sibling is a part of childhood that will never be lost.
That's a nice one.
It's part of who we are.
So what steps can parents take to help siblings form strong bonds?
It's such a great question, Marianne. There are so many things. And one of the things, I'm just going to give you a lot of them, not necessarily in an order of preference or age. I like what you said about the sitting on the log, because what that does, without screaming and yelling and forcing, you be nice to your brother, you be nice to your sister, excuse me, is that I think the number one important thing to think about when you're looking at siblings, providing nobody's on the verge of getting hurt, is to try to let them figure it out, but we have to give them skills to do that. And I'm going to give you in just a moment, I have a handout that I'm going to talk about it. And I when you post the recorded version of this, I will post it and people can print it out if they'd like to show you how to do that. But it's really about three things, and it's relationship, relationship, relationship. Sometimes we assume that kids understand what we mean when we say things as parents, like be nice to your brother, be nice to your sister, share your toys, just talking. And they're just words. We have to give kids experiences to do that. And so let me come back to that, because I want to connect the brain research with that and why that's so important. But in terms of building the relationship, and then I'll come back to that, how do we create those bonds?
Sure.
It's looking for the good. And so, for example, you might say, one of the things that a lot of parents may or may not do is on a child's birthday, having this sibling, when they're old enough, or even if they're just very young, they can draw a picture, give a picture or draw something, make a card for the sibling for their birthday, have the sibling give the other sibling a present just from them. It could be, something that costs $1. It doesn't have to be anything big, but it's the idea of it. It's you want to, I wrote myself some notes on this. I wanted to make sure it's about making sure we give all of the siblings consistent attention. And that's very difficult if you have multiple children and you're working and you're trying to keep a household up. But some of the reasons that siblings don't get along is because they feel like so-and-so is getting more attention than I am. And how come they got that and I didn't? And how come, their needs aren't being met? And so it's all about understanding that it's the perception of the child. It doesn't mean that they're not having their needs met, but it's the perception. And it's all about communicating and talking about that and how we do that. One of the ways that I just mentioned is the chart that I'm going to post. And for those of you watching, I didn't have it in the right format to be able to post it here. I've never been on this platform before, so forgive me. But if you visualize a piece of paper with 3 columns, and the first column having a pair of eyes, the middle column having an ear, and the third column a heart. And whenever we teach a new skill, and I'm going to keep this focused on a young child, we want to use this chart and ask the child, and we don't just do this in one sitting, it can be an ongoing thing. What would it look like if this happened? And I'm going to give you an example. What would it sound like? What kinds of things would we hear? And then how would it feel? So for example, we were chit-chatting a little bit before we started, Marianne, and one of the things, let's say that you're working with young children and you want them to learn to share toys. It's something that, most parents deal with, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of just saying, share your toys, let your sister use that, let your brother use that, whatever, is beforehand, you want to model that and say, when I share my toys, I mean, you sit down on the floor, I'm going to use these toys for a certain amount of time. And then I'm going to look and see what so-and-so, my brother, my sister, is doing and say, may I use that one? I'd like to use that one. Could I use it in a minute? Could I use it in 5 minutes? Whatever. Anyway, you want to model that first and then go through this chart that will be posted. And so even with very young children, I've done this with kids 18 months old. You could say to them, if you're sharing, what would you see? You would see somebody giving a toy to the other person to use. You would see someone looking to see if anybody else is using something that they want. You would see that it's calm. You might only have one thing in each column and I'm sorry that I can't show this while I'm explaining it, but you want to give them feedback based on your modeling and your own experience. Let me come back to that in just a moment. For the middle column where you have a picture of an ear, what kinds of things would we hear if people were sharing? We might hear someone say, thank you. We might hear someone say, I really appreciate that. Now, an 18-month-old probably is not going to say that, but,
remarkable if they do.
I'm sorry?
I said it would be remarkable if they could.
Yeah, but the idea is, and the younger the child, you can just draw a picture, and maybe you could have a smiley face. You would hear nice things. You have to make it age appropriate, obviously. And then under the column with the heart, how would it feel if people were sharing? If the siblings were sharing, it might feel safe. It might feel happy. It might feel fun. Now, again, based on the age of your child, you might write a word with a little picture. You might just do a picture. You might do a couple of pictures. But here's what I think is the most powerful is, while you're doing it, while you're modeling this and role playing this with your child, whatever the situation is, just take out your phone and take some pictures of the children showing you that they know how to share. Print it out, and then you can put that on the chart. And so they have a barometer, if you will, to say, oh, am I doing that? Does that look like that? Because if I'm screaming and yelling and throwing my toys, that's not what we modeled. That's not what we talked about.
That's a positive way a phone can be used with children.
Yes, absolutely. And Marianne, here's the why. I know you talk a lot about the brain, and everything I do is grounded in neuroscience. We know, according to brain research, we know that the higher the sensory input, and we can change those words and say the more real life experience that it is, the greater the chance of dendritic growth in the brain. Right. The greater the input, the greater the dendritic growth. If you just tell somebody something, there's not a lot of input in terms of sensory input. If kids are doing things and they're interacting with the real situation in real life, then you have a lot of sensory input. The greater the sensory input, the greater the chance that that behavior or that information will be stored in the brain in long-term memory in a way that's easily retrieved so that the kids can apply it.
Yes. Yeah. It's the whole, that you learn more when you can actually see and be a part of something than if you're just looking at it or reading about it.
Absolutely. It's a real life experience.
Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of taking the pictures so they can see themselves. I think in today's world, children, even 1-year-olds, it is amazing. I teach the music with Mayor classes, which are interactive with the parents there. And when they pull out the camera, the 1-year-olds stop what they're doing to look at the camera. And that kind of breaks my heart, and I'm like, hey, guys, enjoy the moment. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, for something like that, maybe if they don't know that you're taking the picture. It is something that they can look at. They also like to look at themselves back in these pictures in a flattering light. And if you capture something that lets them see themselves less than what they want to be, for the older children, that makes a really big difference. So nice idea. I like that one. I like that.
Thank you.
And by the way, as an aside, Atul has twins as well.
Oh, and you know what? I see that there are messages, and I'm going to put my glasses on. I don't like wearing my glasses when I do this because of the glare, but there he is. All right, thank you. It's very nice to be here. You know, another strategy, Marianne, that people can do that is very, very powerful. You can use it with anything, but I'll give you examples with siblings. Is in your family, I encourage parents, you know what, focus on different positive character traits. And maybe you pick a different one every week, or, you know, even, you know, people say to me, and my former mentor used to say this, you know, well, how is a 2-year-old or 3-year-old going to be able to say words like, you know, responsibility and initiative? And, you know, the answer is always, if they can say Tyrannosaurus Rex and Triceratops, they can say initiative and perseverance and responsibility. And so let me give you an example. Let's say a family is working on initiative with very young children. You know, you're up till age 7, 8. I mean, you can do this with teenagers too, but I'm focusing it on younger children right now. And so during the week, you want to use the term as you're doing things and show that to the child. You know what? I'm going to use initiative right now because I'm going to put the dishes away and nobody's asking me to do it. I'm doing it because I know it needs to be done. Then when you see a child, you know, picking up their toys, even if it's only one thing, let's say a child is doing 5 things within a 1-minute period. They're picking up a toy, they're throwing a toy, they're stepping on it. You know, if there's only 1 out of the 5 that's positive in terms of appropriate, that's where you want to focus. And so try, again, providing nobody's getting hurt and the house isn't, you know, being trashed or anything, you want to focus on that one thing and say, oh, you just used initiative by picking up that toy. You must be so proud of yourself, and I'm so proud of you too. And what that does is, we know, well, let me back up. We know that the behavior that gets the most attention is the behavior that we will see more of.
Yes.
And so we want to try to stop, don't do that. I said, no, don't do that again. How many times do I have to tell you? We want to try to ignore as much as we can, and then hit the key point of what the child did appropriately. Once the child knows that, they know what initiative is, they know what caring is, here's how you can connect it with the sibling bond very, very early. You know, we've been talking about initiative in our family. Let's do a scavenger hunt and see if we see your sister or your brother using initiative. Let's not tell them, let's just watch.
Nice.
And maybe 5-10 minutes later, you know, the one sibling says to and again, this is age dependent. I'm giving you a general way to look at this, but maybe one sibling says, oh, you know, Mommy, I saw, you know, Billy put his toy away or pick up the towel or whatever it was. And then you approach the child and say, oh, you just used initiative. Do you know how you did it? And so the conversation can become a teachable moment. And then you have the other child do it with the other child. You can even take siblings, and this is not directly siblings, but it builds that foundation. You can say to siblings, you know, again, as young as, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years old, if they know this and they've had practice, we're going to the grocery store. Let's go on a scavenger hunt and see if we see people using caring or whichever positive character trait you're doing. And so you have kids watching, oh, that person let that other person in line. That person helped that person who couldn't reach the can on the top shelf. And so the more we can bring that out in our world in general, the more connected we can have that with the sibling relationship, the greater the bond within that. And it's a shared vocabulary. They know what they mean when they say that. They can use it with each other.
I love the idea of focusing on finding the good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because so many times when you're out and about, you hear people say, "Oh, look at what she's doing." And it's usually something negative. But I love how you shift that focus to let's find the positive. And we need more of that in the world. And to have the children see it in each other, to find good in each other.
Exactly.
As
And
the youngest,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say this chart that I'm going to post in the group. This is something that can be used over and over and over. Just, you can write on the top of it what skill you're trying to teach, whether it's sharing or, initiative or whatever it is you're trying to encourage more of. But I think that, again, going back to what I said earlier with siblings, and I really don't like the term sibling rivalry, as you know, and that's why I said transforming it to siblings being best friends. It's all about how we create the relationship. And we, as the parents, have a lot of say in that. Now, could there be just personalities that, just clash, whatever? Of course. I mean, that can happen. But we can guide that. We can mold that. We can sculpt that in terms of finding those positive things and building on those every single day.
Right. And as I said earlier, I am the youngest of three. And it's important to respect that not all siblings are going to be the same or like the same things. And interestingly, there's a special, I think maybe on Netflix, I don't know, but it's about J-Lo. And, this woman is a powerhouse in entertainment. She does it all, sings, dance, produces, writes, sings, acts.
Right.
I meant to say. And she talks about how she is the youngest of three. And her family always said, "You're not the singer. This sister dances, this singer's the actress. We don't know what you do." And and so she, I haven't watched the whole thing yet, so I might be getting that just a little bit off, but she was always told that you can't sing. And look at her, so a lot of times parents, instead of focusing on the positive and building around it, sometimes parents do the opposite. And I'm not sure whether they mean to or not, but I might not like baseball, but my brother loved baseball. Right? And I shouldn't be expected to be good at baseball.
Absolutely. We're all different, and we all have different needs and different interests and diversity. And, I think the phrase that comes to mind when I think about this is that fair does not mean equal. It doesn't have to be the same. And I would always encourage parents not to compare. One of the greatest, and I mean greatest in a strong way, not necessarily a positive way. Let me change the word. One of the strongest influencers in, I believe, a negative way, where parents inadvertently create sibling rivalry, is to compare. Why can't you be more like your sister at school? Why can't you be more like your brother in, whatever? Well, they're individuals, and each of them are on their own journey in terms of what they want. And, we've all heard stories, you just gave a great one. I haven't seen that Netflix, but we've all heard stories about people that were told, you can't do this, you're not smart enough, blah, blah, blah. That's really a horrible thing to do. We really need to believe in our children and encourage our children to believe in themselves. And one of the things I said before, but I didn't highlight it, when I said, oh, you used initiative by doing blah, 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 you must be so proud of yourself. In my one-on-one parent coaching and in my classes, I always encourage parents. Saying I'm proud of you is wonderful. Don't get me wrong. More kids need to hear that. But I encourage parents to make it even more powerful by saying, you must be so proud of yourself. You did blah, blah, blah. Tell them what they did. And I am so proud of you too. Because we want children to have an internal locus of control. We want children to have a positive self-esteem in terms of how they see themselves. So they're not always looking outwardly for approval. We have a lot of dysfunctional relationships, adult relationships in this world, because someone is always looking for approval from the other person instead of saying, you know what, I worked really hard on that. I did a good job. And so by saying, you worked really hard, you must be really proud of yourself, and I'm so proud of you too, takes that accolade, if you will, that reinforcement from here all the way up to here. It really makes it so much more powerful.
Yes. And I like when you pull it together for them to also be not looking just at themselves, but looking at their sibling as well. In Music with Mayor class, I teach the children, after they sing their alphabet, to pat themselves on the back and say, good job, me. And then I tell them, look around, because someone around you is also doing a good job, and shake their hand and say, and good job, you too. So that children learn, I feel good. I didn't need to get anybody else's opinion. I always dislike that at the end of the alphabet. Now I said them, tell me what you think. You know what? You shouldn't care about what others think. You should feel good. I did it. I did it. I don't need you to tell me a good job. And also notice you're not the only one performing well. And that's how we work together better. My brother, sister, and I, we are all different. We all have different interests, but we all have similar interests as well. And I think that advocating for that is such an important thing, and letting the children support each other. And what you said about not fostering, I don't think you might have used this word, but competition between each other.
Right.
Like if,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're probably going to say what I was leading you to.
No, I want to hear. I'm sorry. I'm getting so excited about what you're saying. Please finish.
Because your brother comes home and he won the spelling bee in in his class, but you came home and you didn't. So as a parent, how do you celebrate that? How do you say, like in some schools, they have the individual classrooms do their little spelling contest, right? And your one sibling wins in his class and the other doesn't. You want to really celebrate the one that won without hurting the self-esteem of the one that didn't. How would you handle that?
It's such an important question. And I think some parents tone down the celebration of the child that did a good job because they don't want to make the other child feel badly. And I think if you develop an environment within your home and relationships within your family that promotes diversity in terms of we're all good at different things and it's okay, you could compare it to the parents. So for example, if that were my story, if I had one child that just came home, one winning the spelling bee and the other one, didn't, we could say things like that, how did you learn those words? Those were difficult words. Oh, well, I practiced, I studied, I memorized, I made games out of whatever. And so you want to find out how the person did that, because that will help the other sibling. And then it's also okay to say, so again, in my family, I would say, you know what? You won the spelling bee. That's so amazing. That's wonderful. And you 2 weeks ago won whatever, a race in, at school or whatever. How did you build up that endurance? How did you learn to do that? So it doesn't have to be the same thing, but both children can talk about how they achieve something in their lives, and then you can pull out the commonality. Oh my gosh, you won the spelling bee, you won the race, you both worked hard, you both persevered, you both didn't give up. And so I think that's how you handle it. And then you can ask, and again, this is for children that are a little bit older, you can ask, is there anything that you learned from your sister, your brother, about how they prepared for the spelling bee that maybe would be helpful to you? Is there anything that your brother or sister said about winning the race that you learned that could be helpful to you? And so I think by creating an environment of collaboration and support, that's how you do that. You still want to honor you want to honor both of the kids, and never judge. And I think that's how you do it. And for those of you that are listening or will be listening, if you haven't been doing that, it's okay. As I said at the beginning, you know what? We're all just kind of like, okay, here's your child. I mean, even with my background at the beginning, I didn't know anything about twins. That was a rude awakening. It's like, okay, how am I going to feed these boys at the same time? You know, it was a high learning curve, and that's okay. But if you haven't developed that level of collaboration and support as you want to, and you start to do this, don't expect that it's going to turn around overnight. It probably won't, especially if the child is a little bit older and they've had more time to have it the other way, where maybe it was competition. And so keep going with it, because what you're doing is building programs, mental programs in the child's brain about how things are. And so it takes time. And if one mental program that's already been in place of, well, this is how I do it, this is how it is in our family, you know, we yell at our siblings or whatever, it's going to take some time to make that transition. But the key point for the parent is to be consistent and keep yourself calm. That's my number one parenting tip. Is if you feel frustrated, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel exhausted, and one of your kids does something, and we've all had that feeling like, I'm going to lose it, do your best, take a deep breath, count to 10, walk in the other room, whatever you have to do. Because if you explode on your children, and we've all, you know, had those moments at some point, again, what we're teaching the child is that's how you get mom or dad's attention. And we are hardwired to seek out behaviors that give attention. And so you want to calm yourself. And so if something happens, you don't have to answer right away. Sometimes parents think they have to make a decision. One of the parents that I coached, she said, I was counting to 3, and in my mind, I was thinking, what am I going to say when I get to 3? It's perfectly fine to say to your children, you know what, we need to problem solve this. And I'm a little bit upset right now, or I'm feeling a little bit tired, and I need a few minutes to think about this before we talk about it. Not only does that give you a better opportunity to have conversations with your children, but it models and teaches for them, you know what, you don't have to get upset to problem solve. You don't have to respond right away. You can still be gentle and kind and respectful when you're quote unquote disciplining. And I, in fact, my next article for Brains Magazine is how to transform discipline into a positive teachable moment. And really that's what we're talking about this entire time. And we're just relating it to siblings.
So can I throw a curveball question at you?
Go for it.
Okay. The twins get in, I'm going to use an old word, cahoots with each other. And they team up against the parents.
It's happened to me.
I'm sure it does.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that?
You know, it's funny because when my boys, I'll give you a real life example. I think they were about 3, I'm going to guess. And one of them pushed the other one and he fell down. And so in a gentle but firm way, I said to my other son, because again, you can't ignore that if somebody could be getting hurt, You know what? That's not appropriate. We don't hit in our family. We don't push in our family. Somebody could get hurt, on and on and on. And then the one that fell down that was pushed looked at me, put his hands on his hips and said, "Why are you yelling at my brother?" So first of all, I wasn't yelling, but he knew I was.
They say that, yeah.
And, they double teamed me many times in their lives. And so how I would handle that is, first of all, deep down, I didn't say this to them at the time, but deep down, it made me very happy that they were protecting each other.
Right.
That bond was so strong. And then I would just talk to them and say, well, why is it important that we don't push? Why is it important that we don't hit? And make it a teachable moment, a positive teachable moment, whatever it is, if it's pushing, if it's, whatever the situation is. I would acknowledge, and, I think that the three things that I would encourage parents to do when they're talking to children, whether it's a sibling relationship or just in general, because the siblings will pick up on this and use it with each other, not in these words, but the first thing you want to do is acknowledge. So many kids act out because they just want to feel like they're being heard. They feel like they're not getting attention. They feel like, they have a need. And especially for young children, they may not have the vocabulary to express what they're feeling. And so a temper tantrum, a fight with a sibling really is a cry for help. And they don't know how to emotionally regulate themselves and to express it. So we want to acknowledge our kids. Yes, I hear you. I can see you're upset. Let's talk about this. You want to validate what's going on. Yes, I would be upset if that happened to me too. I would feel sad if my toy just got, thrown in the street or, whatever the situation is. And then you want to develop a plan of action. How can we make this better? I think with siblings, one of the biggest issues with sibling rivalry versus siblings becoming best friends is that parents try to fix it for them. And so I would encourage parents, if the children are, get them calm, give them, some ground rules about, you have, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever. Talk about it with each other and let me know what you come up with. Now, obviously, maybe not with an 18-month-old, maybe. I mean, it just depends if it's very simplified. How are you going to make it better? We'll share. It could be something as simple as that to something 7 or 8-year-old, we'll take turns about this. We'll share this. They'll be more descriptive. But I think allowing the children the opportunity, and again, we want to model that for them, to work it out themselves and to say, you know what, I can give you some suggestions and you can pick which one you think might be best, or you can tell me what you think. Old school parenting, I'm 63 years old. So if I go back to when I was a little girl, most parents didn't talk to their kids. At least that's not what I observed. It was like, you do this, you sit down, because that was the culture, that was generational. That was, of that time. But I think we get a lot, it's not letting the kids do what they want. It's not just saying, oh, whatever you want. It's providing boundaries and guidance and guided choices. So you might say, you can either use it. I'm going to go back to the toys because that's such a big thing with young children. You can either use the toys like we practiced and modeled and share, or we can take them away until you're ready. There's a big difference in saying it's okay, we can take them away until you're ready, as opposed to, if you don't play nicely with these, I'm going to take these away. It's a whole different demeanor, but you're really saying the same thing.
Right. Exactly. It's just like when you're talking to a baby, they really hear the tone of voice and see the facial expression. And you could be saying, you are the ugliest baby. But they don't hear that at all. We're at the end of our time together, so I would like you to do two things. One, tell us a little bit about, in succinct as you can, the Brains magazine and how people can access it and how they can find you if they wanted to pick your brain a little more or maybe hire you for services.
Thank you. Brains Magazine is an online magazine. It's a global magazine, and they have different categories: business, leadership. My articles are in the lifestyle section, and the easiest way to find my articles are on my website. And right now, I'm in the process of adding 2 more, and I have another one coming out next week. My website is my name. It's carikling.com, KARIKLING, carikling.com. And if you look at media, you can see the articles, and you're welcome to share them with everybody. And, you know, the reason I write them is because I know there are parents out there that maybe don't want to ask for help, that maybe feel like it's, you know, it's a sign of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And I want to provide this information. I'm also available for one-on-one consultations, confidential. I do them with people all over the world via Zoom. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at carikling.parenting.
I'm trying to put this up there for you.
Thank you. I'd be happy to list it also when I list the PDF that I'm going to put. I'd be happy to put it under there for you. It's actually on that PDF at the bottom of it.
There we go. All right, so it should be there. I don't see it here in the comments, but I did post it on the page, and you can see it, and your beautiful picture is there as well.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I want to thank you for an interesting talk that is a little bit different than what we were used to. And I like that. We need a diversity of issues here. And thank you so much. And we are going to put up our goodbye video. And everyone else, thank you for being part of this group. And we look forward to seeing you again at another event.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thanks.